Michael, thank you so much for being here. What did you make of this ruling?
I think the ruling was just and fair. I think Judge Engoron lays out everything in this 90-plus page decision, especially on page 41, which references me in the fact that I told the truth. That was something that Donald and Alina Habba, Chris Kise, as well as Cliff Robert, his attorneys, wanted to try desperately to do, and that would be to discredit me, to impugn my credibility in hopes that obviously this decision would not be where it is. I actually thought the amount would be and should be higher, but I defer to Judge Engoron.
We're going to talk about the piece referencing your credibility in a minute, but first I want to get through your sense of Donald Trump. What's going to matter more to him, the dollar amount or the fact that he's barred from doing business in New York for 3 years?
Well, I think it's the dollar amount, because that's the immediate issue that he has to contend with. Where does he come up with $355 million? That's exclusive of the $86 million or $88.6 million that he owes to E. Jean Carroll in that civil case. This is a staggering amount of money for virtually anybody. I mean, maybe there's a handful of people, a handful in the entire country, who can afford to write a check for $500 million. Donald is not one of them. So right now, the pressing issue is if he's going to appeal. How does he appeal? Does he put up a cash bond? Where's he getting the cash from? He's not going to find somebody to bond it for him. He couldn't find somebody to bond $5.3 million in the E. Jean Carroll case.
Okay, so there's the dollar amount. What do you think the barring from business for 3 years? What does that mean?
That's a big problem for him, because so is Don Jr., so is Alan Weisselberg and Eric Trump. So who's going to run the business? Ivanka? Doubtful. She doesn't want anything. She wants to stay as far away from this scenario as she possibly can. They have their own life. So what happens to the Trump Corporation?
So who do you think runs the business? And who do you think runs the business, especially given that you have this monitor that's going to continue to babysit the business?
Well, you need a monitor to babysit, considering, again, if you read Engoron's decision, there's a reason why a monitor, a receiver, has been appointed to ensure that Donald doesn't hypothecate, transfer, or encumber any of these assets further than they are, so as not to frustrate the judgment.
Talk me through what it would look like for the business to potentially sell off assets in order to get to a place of financial liquidity.
I don't think it's possible, at least not with the New York State assets. So, for example, the thing many people are forgetting is Donald Trump's basis in the bulk of his assets is relatively zero. 40 Wall Street, $1 million. The parking lots that he owns, the restaurants, they were all taken as the sponsor when he was developing the properties. So he has a zero basis in that. You're going to have capital gain tax on the differential when they get sold, no different than anybody would pay. So chop it by 40% or 50%. So that $240 million asset is $120 million clean. But then you have mortgages on it. None of these assets aren't encumbered by a mortgage. So it's very little. All the assets in New York, if they were sold, I don't think cover the $355 million.
So to just underscore what you're saying, he's stuck.
That's a great way to describe it, and I'm going to use your language. He's stuck.
So what happens to Donald Trump when he gets stuck?
Oh, well, he goes into complete and total panic mode. But Donald's theory right now, the only out for him, both financially as well as criminally, regarding incarceration, is if he wins the election. He's not running for the presidency of the United States to do good for the United States. He wants to do, and the only way he can do good for himself is to win the presidency. This is all about running for the purpose of saving himself.
This ruling is dense, right? It is a lot of numbers. It's a lot of accounting of properties, which is perhaps why I was most struck by something that was a little bit more qualitative. I want to read directly from the ruling. It gets to the mindset of your former boss. Quote, "The English poet Alexander Pope first declared, 'To err is human, to forgive is divine.' Defendants apparently are of a different mind. After some 4 years of investigation and litigation, the only error, inadvertent of course, that they acknowledge is the tripling of the size of the Trump Tower penthouse, which cannot be gainsaid. Their complete lack of contrition and remorse borders on pathological. They are accused only of inflating asset values to make more money. The documents prove this over and over again. This is a venal sin, not a mortal one. Defendants did not commit murder or arson. They did not rob a bank at gunpoint. Donald Trump is not Bernard Madoff, yet defendants are incapable of admitting the error of their ways. Instead, they adopt a see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil posture that the evidence belies. How does this square with the MO of the person you used to work for?
It's spot on. I mean, the difference, though, is when I was working for Donald, I was working for the president and CEO of a small myopic real estate development company. It's not the same as working for somebody who's the president of the United States. As a result, Donald has never, ever been able to admit error. He's never admitted error once, not when he was president CEO at the Trump Org or when he was president of the United States. He is incapable of error, and as a result of that inability, we end up with this 90-plus page decision.
He's incapable of error, but it goes beyond him. I mean, there is no one who is a part of the organization who's willing to step up and say, okay, there were some mistakes here.
I did. I mean, the truth...
I mean, actively a part of the organization, but yes, go ahead.
Right. That's because they're fearful for their job. If you say the wrong thing, you're terminated the very next day. With Donald Trump, your job was never secure. You're only as good as what you achieved yesterday. And everyone is in competition in order to get credit from him so that you get a thumbs up, you get a notch in the belt. And that's another day that you're there to work.
So you have the two older sons required to pay some money out of
$4 million each.
$4 million each. You have Weisselberg, the only non-family member, who's being ordered to pay a fine.
$1 million.
Why hasn't he flipped?
Alan Weisselberg is an unusual guy. He's been working for Trump for 50 years. Donald inherited him from his father, Fred, when Donald asked to borrow money to go into the business. Fred didn't trust Donald with money, and so he gave him his bookkeeper. He has been with Donald side by side at the Trump Organization. They were always known as frickin' frack. If Alan told you something, well, I think Donald's going to say this to you, you knew he was going to be saying it to you that day because they've already discussed it. If you knew you were getting a limited or a reduced bonus, Alan already knew about it because they went through it. I mean, Alan and Donald were one. Frickin' frack. He wasn't going to burn the hand that has fed him for the last 50 years.
Let's go back to you and what this all means for you. You were specifically mentioned in the ruling. As you said, I want to read from it. This fact finder does not believe that pleading guilty to perjury means that you can never tell the truth. Michael Cohen told the truth. I just wonder what this journey has been like for you from Trump fixer to now testifying against him, and what it means to you to have Engoron saying, I believe you.
Well, because I was telling the truth. Engoron wrote, it's almost like two full pages in this decision, from pages 41 to 43. The decision is important for me because what most people don't know is what the perjury, for whatever the reason is, they refuse to keep acknowledging what I had lied to Congress about. I lied to Congress about the number of times that I claimed to have spoken to Donald about the failed Trump Tower Moscow real estate project. I stated 3 times because that's what Donald wanted me to say. De minimis, de minimis, de minimis, as it related to Russia. That was staying on message, which was something I was stupid to do, but I did it anyway. The true answer is I spoke to him about it 10 times. That's the perjury. That's the perjury, and why people refuse to acknowledge it. Then they started to attack me at the trial. Alina Habba thought she had an Ironside moment, an aha, I gotcha, when they asked me if what I had told Judge William H. Pauley, the sentencing judge in my case, when they asked me if I had lied to him, and I did. I pled to tax evasion and misrepresentation to a bank. Throughout my entire documents, the sentencing report, all the way on, I stated the same thing. I never committed tax evasion. At most, it would be a tax omission. Every dollar was deposited in Capital One Bank that was located at the base of the building that I live in. Every bank statement was given to my CPA. His job was to reconcile the bank accounts, and he told me what to pay. So I did. It's the way everybody does it. They used it as a let's get Michael Cohen. Donald Trump was behind it. No different than they were behind the unconstitutional remand of me back to Otisville because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right, that I refused to sign what's called an FLM, a Federal Location Monitoring Agreement, that didn't even exist. It was a made-up document. They basically asked me to sign a document that's not legitimate, it's not real. When I refused to do it, they had the marshals waiting for me, and they remanded me back to Otisville for another 15, 16 days of solitary confinement.
You have Engoron validating your credibility in a civil fraud trial. What does that mean as we look forward to some of Donald Trump's criminal cases?
Well, first, thank you, Judge Engoron, because it's true. It's a true statement, and I do appreciate it, as I appreciated Tish James credited me for starting this. What does it mean going forward for what will be the first criminal case to confront Trump? That's March 25th, where I am going to be a witness. I've been subpoenaed to testify. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. Without a subpoena, I wasn't testifying at all. But what does it do? It validates everything that I've been saying all along, whether it was to the Mueller report, to the 7 congressional committees I spoke to the Manhattan District Attorney, to the New York Attorney General. It validates everything that I've been saying all along. That Donald Trump's a con man, he's a cheat, and many other things.
Well, let's talk about the case. It was reported that you met with prosecutors in the DA's office this week. Did you?
I did.
Anything you can share about those
I
conversations?
can't. You know, I've been asked, obviously, not to share anything in regard to the meetings, the sum and substance of the meetings.
As you know, Donald Trump has said that what happened in the hush money payments wasn't a crime. You went to jail for it. I'm sure you see it slightly differently.
I do see it slightly different, and I think that the country should see it differently as well.
Do you see it as election interference?
I do. I think that what we did by stopping Stormy Daniels from coming forward and doing the NDA, I think what it did is it did not give the American public all the information to make a decision whether that's the person that they wanted for the presidency.
Rolling Stone calls this the, quote, final showdown between you and your former boss. I wonder if you see it that way.
I don't see it as the final showdown. I'm being subpoenaed to come in to testify, and I intend to come in and to testify and to continue to speak truth to power.
You have Donald Trump, I'm not sure if you saw already, texting his supporters, fundraising off of this. It is a message we have heard before that he is being victimized. That is not particularly surprising. I guess my question to you is, what do you say to the folks who are still sending in their $5 or $10 to those text message appeals?
It's time to wake up, stupid. All right? This isn't a joke. This is a man who has himself come forward and stated that he intends to rewrite the Constitution, that he wants to destroy our tripartite system of justice. He wants to get rid of the judiciary and the legislature. He wants to confer all power to himself, to the executive branch, that he's going to use the military SEAL Team 6 to go after critics. He wants to execute General Mark Milley, Joint Chief of Staff. Is this who you want to support? You have nothing better to do with your money? Give it to charity. But he's a billionaire. He doesn't need your charity, so don't give it.